I'm Rachel Delatorre. The probably most significant one was the very first one. My husband and I were new to the city. We came to this church, which was a very big church from what we were used to. We kind of joined not to do the Bible study, but just to meet people. And they put a new group together, so we were 5 couples. We studied the Bible, but mainly talked about our lives and about who we were and about our faith. And it became a very safe place to talk about God, which we weren't used to doing with peers before as a couple. I've been in different small groups where we've gone through having children together and the struggles of babies. I've gone through in small groups later in life with married couples and those struggles. And I always just happened to be in a group with people who I felt safe and comfortable with. And that wouldn't have been something that would have happened naturally. I think the way people can be there for you when things are bad is actually easier than when things are good. And so to have people genuinely celebrate with you when good things happen, but also be there when the bad things happen, God has put those people in my life through small groups in more ways than I can count. We adopted all our children, and they came pretty quickly. So right now I have a 13, 14, 15, and 16-year-old. I had a 2, 1 infant, and the mother had called me that the next baby was coming. And I just cried, and I didn't know what to do. We called, it was like midnight, and I called a couple in our small group, and I'm like, I'm having this panic attack. This 4th baby's coming. I don't know what to do. And they said, come over. And we went over, and we just sat. And the wife was very sweet, how you'd expect, oh, it's going to be okay. And, we're all here for you, and everyone's going to help you, and you're going to do great. It's going to be fine. And the husband looked at us and was like, man, this is going to be awful. It's going to be awful for all of us. We're all going to have to do so much work for you, but we love you and we're going to be there for you. And that was the most honest, just God moment for me that said, life is not perfect. I don't need to tell you it's perfect, but we're here for you and we're going to go through this journey. I think accountability, I think truthfulness. Throughout the small groups I've been in, I have those friends who are your cheerleaders, but I also have those friends now that are the elbow you and say, hey, that's not right. You're not on the path that God wants you to be on. And I think that is how it's changed me, that I have these people in my life through small groups who help me see God in everything and help me stay on that path. It's the people who out of the blue will say, I thought of you today, I prayed for you today. And so it makes me pray for them more. It makes me look for them more. It makes me see God in all those things around me that I didn't before.
Sometimes you wanna go where everybody knows your name, and they're always glad you came. You wanna be where everybody knows your name.
Those with childhood memories of church may remember a Bible story and a song about Zacchaeus, a man short in stature but mighty in wealth and in tree climbing skills. The story comes from Luke's Gospel, chapter 19. Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through it. A man was there named Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was rich. He was trying to see who Jesus was, but on account of the crowd, he could not, because he was short in stature. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore tree to see him, because he was going to pass that way. When Jesus came to the place, he looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, for I must stay at your house today. So he hurried down and was happy to welcome him. All who saw it began to grumble and said, he has gone to be the guest of one who is a sinner. Zacchaeus stood there and said to the Lord, look, half of my possessions, Lord, I will give to the poor. And if I have defrauded anyone of anything, I will pay back 4 times as much. Then Jesus said to him, today salvation has come to this house, because he too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek out and to save the lost. There's so much in this story beyond what we learned as children. Jesus came to Jericho on his way to Jerusalem, where some very bad things were going to happen. And Luke made a point of telling us that Jesus was not visiting Jericho, he was passing through it. Jericho was a wealthy city, sitting right on one of the major trade routes. One of the residents of Jericho was our friend Zacchaeus, not just a tax collector, but a chief tax collector. Zacchaeus suffered from poor favorability ratings there in Jericho. In the first place, no one really loves the tax man except for his parents, grandparents, spouse, and children. The rest of us, not so much. But Zacchaeus and his team weren't collecting taxes for Jericho or for Israel. No, they were collecting taxes for the Roman government. And friends, there aren't enough curses and epithets in all the world to describe how the Jews of that day felt about the Romans. Rome had a big operation to run, and so the tax burden that they imposed was heavy. But it gets worse. Tax collectors like Zacchaeus paid a franchise fee in order to collect taxes on behalf of the Roman government. As long as Rome got what Rome wanted, they didn't care how Zacchaeus went about his job or even how much he collected. It was common practice for tax collectors to pad the tax bill and pocket the difference. Well, this practice made Zacchaeus a very wealthy man, but he was not the hometown boy made good. He was despised by his neighbors, and they couldn't do anything about it. After all, Mr. Z operated with the full weight and authority of the Roman government. He was free to take whatever he wanted from anyone he wanted. As Jesus was passing through town, it was like a big parade in Jericho. Whether Jesus wanted to be a celebrity or not, the people treated him like one almost everywhere he went. Luke tells us that Zacchaeus couldn't see Jesus because of the crowd, because Zacchaeus was economically and efficiently constructed on the vertical axis. Some might consider it rude and insensitive today, but Luke describes Zacchaeus as short of stature. It's impossible for us to know if Zacchaeus might have had the medical condition of dwarfism or if he was simply less tall than average. Of course, this is pure conjecture on my part, but it is a well-documented sociological dynamic that taller people are generally treated as more deserving of the space they occupy, and less tall people are treated as less deserving of the space they occupy. I say this as someone who spent most of my time in school less tall than my classmates. Randy Newman's famous song in 1977, Short People, was a satirical commentary on the prejudice that less tall people face. The lyrics are so rude that I can't share most of them with you. Just a few of the less inappropriate lyrics. Short people got no reason to live. Don't want no short people round here. Now, Randy Newman expressed frustration that people took his song seriously rather than as a parody, but he did enjoy the benefits of the song being number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100 for 3 weeks. You know, I can't help but wonder if there was a connection between Zacchaeus' height and his occupation. Could it be that he was bullied as a child growing up in Jericho and he was out for some payback? Before he was Zacchaeus, the chief tax collector, was he known as Zacchaeus the Short? Was he compensating by becoming large in wealth, a big man around town? Or was he simply motivated by good old-fashioned greed? Zacchaeus ran ahead of the crowd and climbed a tree to get a better vantage point. When Jesus came to that place, he looked up and saw Zacchaeus. It's interesting that Zacchaeus did something a child would do, climb a tree in order to see Jesus. It's also interesting that Zacchaeus, the one who was working hard to see, was the one who was seen. Jesus saw Zacchaeus, and he called Zacchaeus by name. We all need to be seen. We all need to be heard. We all need to have someone who knows our name. Our names mean something important. Names mean something in the Bible. Names mean something for us today. And some people name their children after a parent or a grandparent or a great-grandparent, meaning that son or daughter belongs to a family, to a lineage, to a tradition. And some people name children after virtues like grace or joy, as an aspiration for the character and the personality that they have and that they will have as they grow. Some name their children to acknowledge the effect of the child on the parent. My son's middle name is Matthew, which means gift of God, which is how his mother and I have felt almost every day of his life. And of course, his first name is Chase because she said so. But it's also been true that we've had to chase him down from time to time at various stages of his life. Some people give their child a name that is unique from every other name they've ever heard. And perhaps that's an effort to recognize the uniqueness of that child or their family. Names have deep meaning. They aren't just words. They describe something much more profound. There's a world of difference between someone saying, "Hey, you," and calling you by name. Jesus looked at Zacchaeus in the middle of that crowd and called him by name. And then he invited himself to dinner at Zacchaeus' house. I don't know how that would make you feel, but it made Zacchaeus tremendously happy, and he scrambled down out of the tree to lead the way to his home. Of course, the crowd wasn't happy about it. And it's hard to blame them. After all, when the guy who has made himself rich by overtaxing you gets special treatment, who would be happy about that? Can you believe it? He's gone to have dinner with a sinner. And the irony here is that Jesus knows Zacchaeus' name and what it means. And so does everyone else in Jericho. The name Zacchaeus means clean and pure. Maybe it's what his parents believed at his birth. Maybe it's what his parents hoped for in his maturity. It's certainly not what the people of Jericho thought when they spoke the name Zacchaeus. Could it be that it stung a little bit when Zacchaeus looked in the mirror and whispered his own name? Jesus wasn't limited by what the townspeople thought of Zacchaeus, and Jesus wasn't limited by what Zacchaeus thought of himself. Jesus saw Zacchaeus for who he really was, and more importantly, for who he could become. After a dinner meeting with Jesus, Zacchaeus, and Zacchaeus' family and friends and staff, Zacchaeus experienced a significant change of heart. In front of everyone present, Zacchaeus made a pledge of extravagant generosity for the poor and abundant restitution for the people he had wronged. In the first place, giving away half of his assets to those in need, well, that's a lot of money. And second, giving back not just what was stolen, but returning 4 times that amount to what has to be a long list of people. And 4 times was way beyond what the law required to make restitution. You have to wonder, what is Zacchaeus gonna have left? But Zacchaeus was cheerfully bearing what the Bible calls fruit worthy of repentance. It's an authentic change, not an empty promise. It's a soul transformation, not a surface makeover. And perhaps for the first time ever, Zacchaeus began living up to his name, clean and pure. And Jesus sealed the deal and said, "Today, salvation has come to this house." We all have a name, but sometimes there's a disconnect between the meaning of our name and the reality of who we are. An encounter with Jesus in the company of friends can turn everything around because we all need someone who sees us like Jesus does. I love Rachel's story. She was surrounded by people who loved her. They loved her enough to stand with her through thick and thin, They loved her enough to tell her the plain and honest truth. And just like Zacchaeus, the tax collector, became Zacchaeus the benefactor and made things more than right with those he had wronged, that was something that Zacchaeus and his neighbors probably thought was impossible. Just like that, Rachel's group helped her to see that something that seemed impossible could be made possible. And that's our invitation to you, to have dinner with Jesus in the company of friends, to step into a relational experience with a small number of other people and do life together, to see and be seen, to hear and be heard, to love and be loved with Jesus right there with you. An encounter with Jesus in the company of friends can turn everything around, because we all need someone who sees us like Jesus does.